So thanks everybody for joining us this evening. This is our fifth webinar that we've done in a series of webinars in the PSAC Prairie region. We've got a great presenter tonight, Patrick Stewart from the Independent Living Resource Center. Will give a presentation on mental health challenges with kind of a slant on mental health first aid and self-care, addressing issues that you might notice in your coworkers, or family, those kinds of things. So for those that are familiar with the webinar process, you might have already heard this before. But what we'll do is I'll go through a quick run around of how the presentation will work, how to ask questions, raise concerns, those kinds of things. Do a couple introductions, and then we'll start with our presentation. So with tonight's webinar, there'll be three different opportunities where the presenter will ask you for feedback that he would like answers to questions for. So when we prompt your questions, what we'd like you to do is in those parts in the webinar presentation, take an opportunity in the questions box to answer the question that's been raised. And we'll have both Lindsay Sparks, who is the regional representative out of the Calgary regional office, still doesn't sound right, and as well as O'Neill Carlier, who is the a regional representative out of the Edmonton regional office, monitoring those and providing feedback to Patrick. Once we've completed the presentation end of our webinar, we'll open up the opportunity for questions. So we'll use a similar process for asking questions. If you have a question, please enter it in the dialog box. When you do enter in a question, please, if you know your local and your component, jot that down as well, so that if we do need to follow up with locals or components, we can do that. For the purposes of our questions, a couple of reminders. Please keep your questions relevant to the presentation this evening. If you have questions that don't revolve around this webinar presentation, you can email me, contact me, and we'll direct your question and address your health and safety concern or your general concern as best we can. The other thing that I always make note of is part of our job as PSAC staff is we can offer resources, supports, guidance to locals, but for any specific action that needs to be taken within a workplace, within a local, that is the responsibility and the obligation of the local and the component to have the ability to decide how they resolve workplace issues. So if the question comes up, we may have to answer the question in a general sense and then refer you back to your local or your component for more specific resolution to your workplace. So the first thing I'm going to do in order to engage everybody a little bit is I'm going to open up a poll question. So the first question I have for you, and you can answer through your toolbar, is how many PSAC regional webinars have you attended? So your options are, this is my first one, you've attended 2, 3, or all 5 that we've offered in this series. So I'll give you about a minute maximum to enter in your answers, and we'll see what we get back for responses. Again, so our quick poll question is how many PSAC regional webinars have you attended? Your first one, 2, 3, 4, or all 5. And I'll give you a couple seconds to finish answering, and then I'll close the poll and see what we've got for responses. Okay, so I'm going to close the poll and let's share the responses. So we have 23%. This is my first one. 2, 15%. 3, 33%. And then all 5 is 18%. So I think that's really helpful to see. And I'm, to all those people that have attended all 5, thank you so much. The next poll, I'm gonna ask one more question here before we get started. Okay, hold on. I lost my feed here, sorry. Lindsay, can I get you taking over for 1 minute while I work out my technical difficulties here?
Yep. Okay. Do you want to go with the introductions?
Yeah, let's go. Let's get right to the introductions, please.
Okay. O'Neill, are you there?
I am. Thanks, Lindsay.
Okay, good. First, we'll start with Marianne Haldoon, our Regional Executive Vice President. I'll just turn the mic over to you, Marianne.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. And great poll, Clint. Sometimes we do them and we see the same names, and that's a great thing. We really appreciate the fact that you are giving up an evening, to come and have a conversation with us and get some information. I want to thank Patrick, who was there was no question about, being available to bring this presentation. The whole issue of mental health in the workplace has been a priority for us. It's been a priority within our health and safety structures. It's been a priority at the bargaining table, whether you're Treasury Board, federal government, private employer, it doesn't matter. The issue of mental health in the workplace and how that affects you at home has been something that's been a priority. And in this time right now, where we have so many members working from home with all of the additional stressors, we wanted to make sure that we gave you some information on things to look for and things you can do and supports that you can find, because for some it may not be a problem. Maybe it's not a problem today, but tomorrow could be different. And for others with other stressors in their lives, this is something that is critical to get us through this point until we get back to some sense of normalcy. So I want to thank you for joining our webinar, and I'll be sticking around for questions after. And thanks again, Patrick, and thanks again to all the staff. They're giving up their evening once a week as well, but I think some people are kind of liking to broadcast. So, who knows, we should try podcasts. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. Thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll talk later.
Thank you, Marianne. Good idea. Okay, at this point, I'd like to have O'Neill Carlier from our Edmonton office introduce our guest speaker.
Thanks, Lindsay, and welcome everyone. For over 20 years, Patrick has been working in support of people with physical, intellectual, and mental health related disabilities in a wide variety of capacities. Today, he continues to do frontline work within the community, in addition to serving as an instructor and accessibility consultant for Winnipeg's Independent Living Resource Center. He is a father of 2 children, a graduate of the University of Winnipeg, and a multiple hockey pool champion. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you very much. Almost like I might have wrote that myself. Okay, are we ready to go, Clint?
Yeah, we're good to go. I'm back. Yeah, I'm good to go.
Okay, great. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to join us this evening to talk about a subject that I'm pretty sure means something to everybody, because we are all going through this together right now, regardless of what our roles are or where we're working at the moment. I maybe first want to just sort of mention a little bit about our organization. I think that's going to give you a sense of kind of our take on this issue. The Independent Living Resource Center, we're a consumer-controlled nonprofit that has been working in the city of Winnipeg since 1984. What consumer control means is that our board of directors, the majority of our employees, are people who live with disabilities, with physical disabilities, invisible disabilities, episodic disabilities, mental health related disabilities. And at the core of our organization is an understanding that disability really is just a normal part of life. It's part of the universal human experience, and that extends as well to mental health problems. Right now, we are really living in unprecedented times, and it is obviously, I think, incredibly normal that some of us are feeling stresses, that some of us who may have been living before the pandemic with mental health aggravations, with mental health problems, that we're needing to find new ways of supporting each other and supporting ourselves. And that's really what this presentation is going to be all about. So we're going to be talking about the stresses that we are, that we're feeling, strategies as well that we might be able to use. I really kind of tend to go towards kind of practical, hands-on, common sense stuff. My background in instructing mental health is as a certified mental health first aid instructor. I normally have the luxury of 2 days and 12 hours. And Clint has sat through that with me and knows it's a really good program. What we focus on is, how can just sort of the everyday person, and not mental health professionals, but really the everyday person, what can we do to support people that might be struggling to cope with emerging mental health problems, or maybe living in crisis, might have recently experienced a trauma, maybe living perhaps with addiction issues or undiagnosed mental health problems. What can we do just to kind of be our best self, to get involved and make sure everybody's safe? Clint and I have been going back and forth a bit this week, and I know that we have a really diverse group. There are people, here joining us that are working from home, people that are still working in the field. I think maybe some people that have been temporarily laid off. We have, parents, children, people that have been affected by this pandemic in some really significant ways. But what we all share is that this situation is touching all of us. It is really serious, but I think we can sort of take solace in the fact that because we are all experiencing it, we can all really reach out and relate to each other. We have, I think, a really great opportunity to use those human empathy skills to find ways to support each other, to connect, to be healthy through this evolving situation. So if the slideshow is working properly, I think what you're looking at right now is what the workshop is not about. Yes.
Can I just hop in for a minute? So
yeah,
your mic is a little bit choppy and a little bit quiet. If you can move a little bit closer to the microphone, I'm hoping that'll kind of resolve some of those issues.
Okay, how's that? Is it better?
Better? Yeah, it is on my end. If anybody still has issues, let us know in the comment section, the questions.
Okay, I hope that's a bit better for everybody. This is my first. Well, I've been an instructor for many years. This is my first online webinar, and I tried to run out this week to buy a headset and a microphone, and that has become an essential need suddenly with everybody working from home. I couldn't get one at Staples, Best Buy, online. Everybody's sold out. So I apologize for having some audio problems here. The slideshow. Where we should be at is what the workshop is, is not going to be about, what we're not going to be covering. We're not going to dwell on this too long. We're not going to be talking about, theories and conspiracies about COVID, when is it going to end? I think we all, firmly believe that this isn't, necessarily going to go on forever. We're also not going to be, it's not really a space to be working out personal or professional grievances. Of course, there might be, some conflicts and disagreements, at home, in the workplace, protocols and, expectations and boundaries. So we're not going to be, focusing on sort of shaming people that don't agree with us. I know that there are definitely some differences of opinion out there about when we should open up, stuff like that. And we're not going to be disseminating government, healthcare, scientific, and kind of the COVID news. What we're going to be focusing on is, hopefully stuff that we can all relate to, and I think find a lot of agreement on. Number one, prioritizing caring for ourselves, our families, our friends, our colleagues, really making mental health important. It's really critical that our attitude prioritizes mental well-being right now. We're going to be focusing on creating stability and control where we can, during a time when we might not be able to, have access to the same resources, and that there are just frankly some things in our life that we might not have, control over, in this moment. So where can we look to build stability? And of course, we're going to be looking at getting through this together. Having strong mental health, doesn't really have so much to do with just being, a strong person, a strong individual. It has so much to do with family, with workplaces, with communities, about really being in this, for each other. So a place that I often like to begin when we're talking about mental health is, well, just asking generally first, what is health? It seems like a simple question, but when we dig deep, it gets a little bit more complicated. In this time, we'd obviously be very grateful for not having COVID-19, for not having the virus, but that might not be enough to sort of say that we are a healthy person in this moment. The World Health Organization, they define health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So they're recognizing, pretty directly that our social health and our mental health are equally important. They're equally important partners here in our overall concept of health. And that's because the mind, body, and spirit connection, it's really real. It doesn't just exist in wellness workshops. It has a lot of, a lot of basis in science, and we're going to be looking at that as well as time allows. So here is a diagram I like a lot. It's called the triangle of health. And you see we have three sides here: physical health, social health, and mental health. And not only do these things exist, they're in constant dialogue with each other. They're in constant communication with each other, overlapping, informing each other in sometimes obvious and sometimes not that obvious ways. So physical well-being, what do we need to be physically well? Well, diet, nutrition, exercise, sleep. I'm sure everybody would they have different things in their life that they do to keep themselves well, and we see a lot of commonalities as well there. Physical accessibility, sunshine is a big one for me, whether it's a sunny day or a cloudy day. Whether or not we're living with disability or access to healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. Our social well-being. So we're talking about friends, we're talking about family, we're talking about kids, but we're also talking about things like money. We're talking about things like employment. We're talking about things like education, maybe our mental health literacy. We're talking about the way maybe social media affects us, what the politics in our community are. There's a lot that kind of goes into that social fabric that health exists. And the final plank or beam in our triangle is mental health, which is sometimes a bit harder to pin down. When we talk about, when are we mentally well, we might talk about positive emotions that we might be feeling. But there's a lot that goes into it. So some of the ideas that we have here are, a balance in our life, how stress is affecting us, our self-esteem, whether or not we're living in isolation or connected to other people that care about us, whether or not we're engaging in self-care, whether or not we're getting breaks, from our work or breaks from life that we all need sometimes. At the end of the list here, I put two ideas I think that really kind of come to the top when I think about what we need to be mentally well. The first is efficacy. So efficacy is sort of the understanding that what we do, what we say, what we think, that these change the ways that we feel about our life, and they change our circumstances around us. We all sort of need to have a sense that when we're in difficult times, when we're experiencing stress, when things are hard, and it is very normal in life for things to be hard, that we have the ability to change our circumstances or change the way that we feel. And that belief really is, that a better day is going to be coming. So now mental health. This is the Public Health Agency of Canada's definition. Mental health is the capacity of each and all of us to feel, think, and act in ways that enhance our ability to enjoy life and deal with the challenges that we face. It is a positive sense of emotional and spiritual well-being that respects the importance of culture, equity, social justice, interconnections, and personal dignity. I think it's a fantastic definition. I think it's probably about as short as we could get to define mental health, because there's just so much that goes into it. I think it's pretty concise. It recognizes, the interconnectedness of all of these different health factors, what we looked at a moment ago on the triangle of health. And it recognizes that mental health, really doesn't exist in a vacuum. I underlined the top of it, the capacity in each and all of us, which I think is a really, really important idea. When we think about mental health, we need to be thinking about capacity. Mental health, is not our ability to avoid all of the challenging things that are going to happen in life. Simply by virtue, of being a human being, we are going to experience some hardship. We're going to experience loss. Universally, we are all going to, lose somebody, perhaps that we love. We're going to be stressed by money. Circumstances are not always going to be optimal. So facing challenges, facing hardship, and experiencing sadness or loneliness. These are really normal things, for somebody to go through. So mental health isn't our ability to necessarily avoid those things. Our mental health is our capacity to get through them. It's our resiliency. But as I mentioned, a few moments ago, it doesn't just come down to the individual. The capacity is also a communal idea. It's the capacity of our families to talk about these subjects, to support each other. It's the capacity of our workplaces to make sure that mental health problems don't exist in the shadows, and that employees have access to resources, or able to talk, to people that have a pretty significant impact on their life about these types of issues. And it's, more broadly speaking in Canada, it's our access to professional services, to mental health resources, to therapy, to counseling, to these types of professional services that are going to be really essential for some people. So our health is interconnected to our social situation. It's connected, of course, to our physicality as well as our mental well-being. And we need to think about our capacity as being an interconnected concept as well, that our individual capacity is connected to the capacity of our family, to our friends, to our community, and to our workplace. So what is challenging our capacity right now? What is different today, than it was a few months ago? Well, at the top of the list, we have social isolation, for sure. We have, certainly many of us might be afraid, for our loved ones or for ourselves of becoming sick. And this can be, a real concern depending on, on where we work. Myself, in addition to instructing workshops and working on accessibility issues here in Winnipeg, I'm also a frontline healthcare. I do that on a part-time basis. So what that means is I work, in the community. I work in individuals' homes, doing personal care, doing things that involve getting close, things that can't be done through physical distancing. So I certainly have a degree of stress in my life, worrying about becoming ill myself, or transmitting an illness onto somebody else. Financial stress, job uncertainty, for sure, something I think that many of us can relate to. Even if we're working from home, the economy is suffering. How long is this going to go on? I think a lot of us are going to have an increase maybe in our responsibilities, our dependencies, either people that are dependent on us or us being dependent on other people. It can be more difficult, or in some cases, maybe impossible to access some of the community resources that we've used before. And then just the confines as well of a sedentary lifestyle. Harder to get out of the house. Harder maybe to get nutritional food, to exercise, to have normal sleep patterns. These types of things are definitely going to be impacting our capacity. So we aren't going to be able to get through this with logic alone. We need safety and connection. When these things are threatened, what happens neurologically is our limbic system, our emotional part of the brain. It kind of shuts down our logical prefrontal cortex. It makes it, I think, challenging for some of us when we're experiencing elevated levels of anxiety to necessarily make decisions that are in our own best interest. We really do have a primal need to feel safe, to feel connected, to feel loved. And because there is such a sort of a physical component, to our mental health, to how we experience anxiety, we're going to be looking at some strategies that we can use sort of around the house and in our lifestyle that might be, kind of back doors to supporting our mental health if some of those other resources aren't necessarily available. So we're going to take a break here just for a second to put this question out here. Our universal need for safety and security and connection is being challenged, but we will all react differently because our fears are unique to us. So we're all experiencing a pandemic right now, but we're all experiencing it, through our own subjective experience, through our families, through our workplaces, and through our communities. So the group question is, what are your greatest fears? So I'm going to turn that over to the audience, and I believe some of the moderators are going to provide some of their responses back.
Yeah, so thank you, Patrick. So just as a reminder, for your responses to this group question number 1, please enter them in the questions section of the webinar dialog box. We'll have our moderators pull out some of the responses, and then we'll move forward. So I'll give about, I'd say about 30, 45 seconds for people to enter in their responses, and then we'll get back and see what we've got back for responses to your question.
That's great. Yeah, and I just sort of thank everybody for being here once again, and maybe sharing something, sharing something personal. Having instructed mental health workshops for a number of years, I am sort of consistently floored and impressed by the experiences of everybody, that we're all going through something significant right now, and that we all really do have something meaningful to share that others have an opportunity to learn from.
Right, Patrick, we do have a few responses now. We have quite a few on their job. They're worried about losing their job. They're uncertain about the future, the current situation.
Sure.
We're also getting quite a few on
Yeah, absolutely. I think that job, I think, is at the top. Sorry, say that again?
We're also getting quite a few on people who are worried about.
But I couldn't quite make you out.
Can you hear me, Patrick?
Yeah, it's just sort of, it's kind of fading in and out a little bit, but yeah, I heard jobs and definitely the health of our family, for sure.
Yes.
As my bio said, I have a couple of young kids. I have a partner that has deals with asthma. I work sort of directly with people that often have compromised immune systems, and some people that I've worked with for a very long time. They're really close friends. So their health and well-being certainly is something that it concerns me on a daily basis. Okay, we're going to keep plugging along. Thank you everybody for submitting some answers there. This is, I think, a fantastic visual. What we can control and what we can't control. I think when we look at something like this, I think what's really helpful, of course, is to understand that when we're feeling anxious, right, when we're feeling anxiety. What we're trying to do is to prepare ourselves to respond to some sort of threat, some sort of fear, some sort of pain, something we think that is going to harm us. And coping with anxiety can be really, really challenging when we don't have the control, necessarily to respond to those types of threats. So some of the things we've seen we can't control, the actions of others. How long will this pandemic last? The amount of toilet paper at the store, other people's motives, predicting what will happen. But when we kind of bring it towards ourselves, what we can control, turning off the news, our own personal kindness and grace, what we are going to do with social distancing, what our own boundaries are, finding fun things to do at home. And when we put our energy into those areas, hopefully what we're going to see is results. And that kind of gets back to that idea of efficacy, that we all want to have that sense that we do have some control over a situation, that we have the ability to make things a bit better. I think one thing that we can kind of maybe remind ourselves when we're feeling stressed out of the things that we can't control is that even outside of the pandemic, we are often living in a world with things that we can't control. We don't have control, over everything. The world is just too big, there's too many people, and sometimes problems are too complicated. And I understand as well that sometimes you might be dealing with things that one moment feel in our control and one moment not in our control. Think about my kids and their homework and trying to teach them from home that, that seems to walk that line sometimes. But just because we can't control something doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be an immediate threat to us, because we do deal with things that we can't control, day in and day out. So here is our definition of anxiety. Anxiety is our mind and body preparing to cope with some sort of future problem that we anticipate is going to cause us harm. So both our mind and our body are responding. We're having a neurological, physiological reaction to a perceived threat, to a fear, something we think is going to harm us. Of course, anxiety is very normal. It's even a really helpful part of being a human being. When we think about things like when we were in school, if we had an exam that was coming up that's worth 50% of our grade, we would feel anxiety and we'd have to do something to plan, to prepare, to respond to the situation. If you're ever crossing a street and we see a car speeding and we're worried that they're going to run a red light, even if we have things like vacations we want to save up for, any type of problem that we see in the future, we want to respond to it. We don't want to just be sort of a victim of circumstance. So anxiety can be a really helpful thing, and really, really normal. But like many things, being a human being, it can veer, we can kind of get off our course a little bit. And anxiety can, in fact, cause harm and become a disorder if we feel, well, one, if it, maybe causes us to avoid participating in, some of the things in our life that we enjoy, some of the things that give our life meaning. If we're experiencing anxiety with, a great amount of intensity or for a very, very long period of time, it's causing, maybe an extraordinary amount of suffering. If we experience panic attacks, or if we feel that maybe we need to use alcohol or different types of substances to change our feelings. So, and why would we want to change? Well, because we're feeling stress. Stress, a state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from adverse or very demanding circumstances. And I think just when I say the word stress, maybe we might feel a little tension, in our temples. When we just try to imagine stress, we're going to have a very kind of physical reaction to it, because it is, begins with a physical reaction. Our thoughts, our mind is, letting us know that there is something there to worry about, and our body, because it wants to keep us alive, it wants to preserve us, it is going to respond. So what's happening is our limbic system, kind of our emotional part of the brain, it's getting fired up, and it's telling us, it's sending all sorts of chemicals through our body, telling us that we need to fight that threat, we need to run away from it, or maybe freeze. And if we just sort of stay still, nothing is going to happen. The reason that I have a bear there is that this response, this stress response, is actually a really ancient thing. It's something that human beings have been carrying around for, well, basically as long as there have been human beings. Now, I mentioned anxiety can be a very helpful thing. It's one of the reasons why we're here in the first place, that human beings have made it this far. Our ancient ancestors, when they heard a wild animal, a bear or a saber-toothed tiger, roaring in the wilderness, well, the hair on the back of our neck would stand up, and we would be prepared to respond to a very immediate physical threat. And probably our frame of reference, knowing that bears or saber-toothed tigers in the past have been a danger to us, that's informing that response. So what's going on, in our body? Our heart rate's going up, our blood pressure's going up. Our blood is actually becoming stickier as well, because we're preparing to be bit by, torn apart by a wild animal. This is actually true. Our immune system, begins to change. If we're living in this anxious state for a long period of time, our body is adjusting itself for sort of superficial injuries, while we might have a more difficult time fighting off flus and colds and stuff like that. We might feel clammy skin. There's a change in our bodily fluids, because our body is redirecting fluids to vital organs that it wants to preserve. Or you might feel a sense of indigestion, have an upset stomach, or feel nauseous, because the body doesn't consider digestion in this moment of very mortal danger to be something that's of primary importance. So I think we can all kind of relate to some of these symptoms if we ever had to do public speaking, or if something frightening has happened to us. We have felt it physically. We don't just feel it between our ears. Now, the danger, though, is when we live in one of these states for a long period of time, when we experience acute and chronic stress, chronic anxiety. It can have very serious long-term health outcomes. Increased chances of heart disease, certain types of cancer, diabetes, dementia, etc. So there is definitely a very strong physical component to it. Now, what is where is this anxiety? The context that is existing right now, well, might be in a context of what we're just going to call cabin fever. And cabin fever can be if you're working from home. I think if you're in the community as well, because so many protocols have changed, we're, I think, experiencing a sense of cabin fever almost no matter where we are. So some of the symptoms being restless, impatient, low mood, problems concentrating or remembering things, sleep issues as well, and that's going to affect people differently. Some people might be having a tough time falling asleep. Some people have a tough time getting out of bed in the morning. Food cravings, a low sense of energy. These are, things that we're going to be experiencing, I think, if we're kind of stuck inside and we're kind of removed from all of those things that we've, used previously, whether physical or social, to maintain that mental well-being. So I'm happy to get to the next part of the slideshow here, because we've been talking a lot about stress and a lot about anxiety and a lot of kind of some of the more negative things might be going on right now. And I'm really interested in kind of getting to this part of the workshop where we're talking about what can we be doing to help manage the stress, to help alleviate the stress. And what we've done is identify 4 core areas that we hopefully are going to have some degree of control over. You can find some just kind of practical, common sense things to help us get through this time. So those 4 areas are structure, connection, activity, and self-care. So structure, I think it is really important to ensure that our days have a beginning, middle, and end. I think this has happened to me. I mean, sometimes I have stopped and wondered, what day is it? Is this a Tuesday? Is it a Friday? It can be really difficult when we're not kind of out there in the world, in that sort of structured world, that 9 to 5, to sort of feel that we, kind of have that temporal grounding. Family team meetings can really help everybody get on the same page. We've been doing team meetings in our house, kids included, to make sure that we have some goals for the day to keep us moving. Finding a ritual that makes you feel good, I think, is really important. And that's kind of, I think, sometimes change, with the circumstances. Myself, what I used to do in the morning before heading out to work was I, maybe give myself a, 5 or 10 minutes of mindful meditation, some guided meditation. And I found working from home that it really wasn't doing it for me, because I was used to kind of going from meditating to getting out into the road, getting on a bus, getting to work, and jumping into the day. And so now what I'm doing is I'm getting up in the morning and doing a walk, and that's been making a really big difference, helping my day begin somewhere. Nutrition, fiber, vitamins, fatty acids. There's so many foods and nutrients that are really important to maintaining our mental well-being, that really help to kind of meet depression neurologically. Keeping our area, if possible, clean. I think it is really helpful, having some control over our physical environment. And I think we can be kind of surprised how much we can do in 15 minutes. That's what I tell my kids anyhow. Taking breaks, of course. Ending your day with kindness is something that has been really important to me lately. Really deciding how I want my day to end. Picking something gentle, something kind, something enjoyable, and saying, I'm going to put the stresses down, I'm going to put the worrying down, I'm going to put the work down at a certain point, and this is what I'm going to do to kind of end my day on a high note. And getting good sleep hygiene as well. So what that means is, going to bed with purpose of sleeping, maybe removing the television if that's something that, is problematic, doing what we can do to make sure that we get a good night's sleep. Connection. Now, I think this has become a cliche at this point, physical distancing, not social distancing. So we really need to be thinking not about being removed from people. Physically, maybe yes, but we want to be doing everything that we can do to create some social connections. Oxytocin, known as the love hormone. We get that from physical contact. We get that from hugging, kissing, cuddling, being in close proximity to people that we love. When we do have those sort of opportunities, my kids must be getting sick of the hugs. I mean, I think I'm probably petting the dog to death at this point. I think it is really important that we keep that as part of our life. Leaning into our inner circle, absolutely. It is a really unique time right now. None of us have kind of been through something like this before, at least sort of in a global sense. And it can be a really wonderful opportunity to kind of get closer to people that are in our inner circle, in our family, people that we live with, and really leaning into those relationships. Reconnecting with old friends. For me, I finally kind of broke down and joined Facebook. I've been getting, messages, from people at the high school, and that's been kind of fun. I'm not sure how much, if I'm really a lifelong Facebooker. We'll see if it's long enough to get into it. We'll see if that happens. But I think it's also really important that we're aware of the effect social media has on us, and that when we're looking at other people's lives, most people are going to be posting a lot of highlights. We need to be kind of cautious that we don't have necessarily unrealistic expectations when it comes to what we should be doing and what our own happiness should look like. Watching the news to get informed, not afraid. I think this is important. We all want to know kind of what's going on, but there is sort of a saturation point. I think where it begins to stress us out too much. We might feel overwhelmed when we're seeing things, too often that we can't control. I think watching local news is really helpful. I watch global news once in a while. I do find that a bit challenging. And admittedly as well, I'm one of these Cuomo heads. I find Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York, he does a press conference every day. There's just something about the frankness that he talks about things and his confidence that makes me feel really good about the situation, even though I don't live in New York. It's kind of become one of my rituals to check in with this guy every once in a while. And also something I've learned is that your phone can actually make phone calls as well. I was, I'm not really somebody to pick up the phone and, have 60-minute conversations, with friends and stuff like that. But I've been trying to do more of that for sure. And also doing phone calls with work, I think is really important. You can't be too connected right now. So here's our next, component: activity, exercise. Very effective treatment for anxiety, depression, and really anything that you might be experiencing right now. If you can find something that's fun, social, meets a variety of functions, so walking with people that we're still in contact with, these are really good ideas. I think it's wonderful that our hobbies now are a priority. It's actually really important that we find things that we enjoy doing with our time. It's a great time maybe to explore new things. At the bottom, I have get back to nature. I think that is, I really do believe that is really, really important. To maintain a sense of connection, with the world. It can be very therapeutic and very grounding. And when we're in this sort of time when we might feel sort of out of sync, the days are sort of blending together, that sort of stillness actually can be really, really appropriate in the natural environment and a great place to reflect. So our last spot is self-care. And then what that really means is that all these things that we've been talking about, we need to prioritize those for ourselves. There is, the sky's the limit. If it doesn't cause harm and it feels good, it's self-care. So for some of us, it might be napping. For some of us, it might be running. It might be cooking. It might be meditating. It might be doing conscious breathing. It might be watching a movie. It can be all sorts of different things. But I think what really kind of ties them all together is that, we're doing it for ourselves. We're understanding that by taking care of ourselves, we are really increasing our capacity to support other people. And that sometimes it does take intention. It just doesn't happen on its own. We might need to make time for ourselves, or really just kind of have a conversation with ourselves and say that, I'm doing this for me, and I'm doing this because I deserve to feel better, in this moment. So absolutely, it is really important to make space for ourselves in this way. So here's our next group question. Our lifestyles have all changed dramatically, and we need to find new ways to ensure vitality. So I think it's good, for us to maybe do a bit of a census with ourselves. What's important to us? What are our values? How did we, how did we speak to those previously, those needs that we have? And what can we do now to make sure that those needs are still being met? So what is bringing you joy and peace of mind presently? And I hope that we're going to hear some interesting things.
So again, just a reminder, enter in your comments in the questions section of your toolbar, and we'll have our moderators moderating, reading some of the questions, and we'll review them and see what some of the responses are. So I'll give you about 30 seconds to type in your responses, and we'll see what comes back.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, one thing that we've been doing around our house is that we are sort of, texting with somebody and simultaneously starting a movie at the same time, so that we're able to sort of watch a movie, with our friends in the way that we're able to. And that has been really great.
Okay. So I'm going to turn it over to the moderators, Lindsay and O'Neill. I'm going to honestly say good luck, because we're getting tons and tons of responses.
Awesome. I can't wait to hear some.
And a wide variety as well. So we created a challenge for our moderators.
There is a lot, and there's a number of our participants here who are talking about enjoying their pets, are bringing them joy and peace of mind. We have music. This is an interesting one. Watching the sunset and dreaming of fishing trips, which I can relate to that myself. Spending time with family members. There's a couple like that as well. There's a lot of unique ones here. Teaching my kids piano lessons. There's just a lot of really different ideas that people have given to us about how how they spend their time, family, pets, reconnecting with family and friends by phone, even sorting old photographs. We have one person who mentioned their church, acing my online courses. You know, I mean, there's so many different ideas here.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, it really, I mean, that's the thing about this situation. It is so unique. That, I mean, we can never sort of say that, you know, those hardships don't exist, but we do have this opportunity to kind of, you know, really lean into some of the things that were really important to us that maybe we didn't have much time for, you know, previously. I think maybe that's coming through with some of the answers. I think that's really great. Okay, well, maybe we'll keep pressing along, because I know, you know, the clock is ticking here. So let's talk about living with people. You know, sometimes challenging to live with people for sure. But, you know, at the end of the day, I think it's something that we're often very grateful for. So children. Now, I know I can't be the only person that has, you know, kids that are going through this. I read a meme the other day that said there are millions of parents out there learning the teacher was not the problem. And that really made me laugh, because we're now sort of responsible for providing some of the structure maybe that the kids were getting through school. And it can be very hard, I think, as well for kids to stay motivated because they're not seeing their friends. Here in Winnipeg, our school division, what they've decided is that, you know, kids aren't going to fail because of COVID. Their grades aren't going to go backwards. They're all going to have the grade, you know, that they had leaving the classroom, and they can only go up. And that sounds really nice, but what we've kind of noticed in our house is that without that sort of threat of the grades being able to deteriorate, there has actually been difficult in some ways for them to be very motivated. So creating a schedule and structure, I think, can be really important. Breaking the day up the best we can. You know, learning more about their interests. I think this is another, you know, it's an opportunity to do that. I have been, you know, learning how to play a lot of video games and learning how to lose with as much grace and dignity as I can, because I'm just not very good at them. Helping them, maybe getting them to help out with meals, chores, or maybe other things kind of around the house that, you know, when our lives were, you know, maybe more outside, maybe more structured, and we didn't have as much time for some of these things. It's a good opportunity to get kids, you know, kind of to play a part and have some meaning. And the final piece there, this is something that, you know, I kind of said to my kids, you know, at the beginning. I think it is, you know, good advice for children. They do need to know that they are safe, that they're okay right now, that there are, you know, millions of helpers around the world that are doing their, you know, absolute best to help other people, and that by staying inside, by what we're kind of going through right now, that our kids are helping to save people's lives. So they're doing something important. When it comes to grown-ups, well, if we are working, and whatever circumstance it is, you know, we do need to have kind of our own spaces. We need to have our own boundaries. If we're working from home, having our own workspaces is important. You know, clearly identifying what our own goals and expectations are. These things are really important. We need to communicate, because we just can't sort of, you know, sit there and be frustrated and then look across the room at, you know, somebody, you know, maybe lovingly and say, you know, why aren't you doing that thing that I'm thinking of right now? It's really important that we keep the lines of communication open. So here are some ideas from working from home. We've already kind of talked about maintaining a morning routine, avoiding as much as possible sort of rolling out of bed and just sort of starting the day with, you know, immediately, 30 seconds. Getting up, you know, for a ritual before the pandemic was, you know, to exercise. Even if it wasn't exercise, just to have breakfast, you know, to give ourselves enough time around the house so that we, you know, aren't leaving and we're not late to work. We want to give ourselves that type of warm up, that type of lead time in the morning too, to really kind of help break the day up and give us some sort of structure and narrative to our day. Having a dedicated workspace for sure. Trying our best to follow, you know, the schedule that we're expected, our regular work schedule. That includes taking our breaks. Getting up and moving is really important. You know, I think I kind of took for granted, you know, how often I might have got up from my desk, you know, in the office, and, you know, to speak to people, to make copies, to get a cup of coffee. You know, if you work in an office or wherever you might be working, you know, there's just a lot of interaction. There's a lot of physical movement. So, you know, we do want to try and be mindful of that and make sure that we're moving at home too. There's no such thing as talking too much to people right now. Regular check-ins, you know, I think a lot of us are doing, you know, Skype and different types of meetings and stuff like that. But if you do have the ability to kind of reach out and talk to some of your coworkers one-on-one about work stuff, but also just to sort of check in with each other, the same way that we would have checked in socially with each other, you know, back back in our regular workplaces. This stuff is really important. And of course, quitting time is quitting time. So we've got a few more slides that we're going to go through about workplaces, maybe what some of our expectations are. As I said, we're not kind of working out workplace grievances here, but I think what we can kind of hope from employers is for things to be straightforward. It's confusing, so we want information, we want boundaries, we want to have a pretty clear idea of when there's disputes, when a decision needs to be made, who's going to make it, what's the criteria going to be. And we want as employees, to know that our safety is prioritized. We might, we need to have transparency, clarity, and definitely some flexibility as well, as protocols change and our routines change as well. So things that employees might be facing, and I'm sure this is going to be true for many people listening this evening. Some of us might be working more, we might be working in isolation. It might be difficult to meet public expectations. I think a lot about people that are working maybe in service industries. Lineups that we see in front of stores, kind of all the different steps that we have to go through to kind of do things that used to be very routine. Of course, personal stresses that existed previous to COVID, are still there. So if people were, maybe, struggling with anxiety, depression, whatever issues might be in their life, which wearing protective equipment, that can be challenging too. I've had to get used to wearing a face mask at work. It's hot, it's stuffy, it sometimes gives me a rash. It's not the easiest thing, to wear for an entire shift. So we want to be cognizant of that. All these changing protocols, fear of infection affecting others, and I think it's really important as well that employees and everybody, no matter where they're working, they have some flexibility and have the ability to communicate with not just with their colleagues, with their friends and family as well. So maybe a little bit more lax on the cell phone rules and stuff like that. So if we're in the workforce, and this would be true for working from home too, we want to be monitoring ourselves. We want to be encouraged by our managers to be monitoring ourselves, regularly checking in, have opportunities for break and refreshment, and whenever possible to work collaboratively, to work in teams. There's so much isolation happening right now. We need to find new ways of doing things that are maybe once done by one person, it now can happen with multiple people who are giving input. And I think we're going to see benefits by doing that in all sorts of other areas. So concerns, that we might have, certainly people that are working long hours without that ability to check in. Anybody saying that they're feeling that they're the only one that can do the job, that they have to kind of have the weight of the world on their shoulders. We want to be concerned about that. Excessive caffeine and sugar intake to just kind of get through our shifts, get through the day. Of course, having to rely on substances to manage feelings is going to be a concern to us. We should be concerned if people aren't able to stay in touch with their friends and family, and if they feel that their needs, that their safety and their wellness needs as workers are less important than the needs of others. So we're getting towards the end here, kind of talking about support. I think some of it's going to present itself in many different ways, as sort of like opportunities or invitations to maybe ask somebody, are they okay right now? Some things that we I think want to be looking out for, in the workplace or in our life or whatever our walk of life is. If we know that somebody is not taking care of themselves, sort of a lack of self-care there. If we notice, a change in personality from kind of how we knew them prior to the pandemic, and that could be expressed all sorts of ways. Crying, being maybe withdrawn, maybe being numb, maybe being wary, making expressions like they just can't take this anymore, anger, irritability. Anybody we know that maybe because of this this situation that they're maybe some difficult social circumstances that they're in are being aggravated. So people that maybe previously had financial difficulties, custody issues, difficulties managing their own health. Maybe they're supporting a parent who's in isolation. It can be a really complicated picture right now. That social support network, how is that going to exist? Sometimes there's really difficult decisions that need to be made. I think also maybe avoiding activities that they possibly once enjoyed, and sometimes too people can be experiencing symptoms of depression and anxiety and really not make that connection to those mental health problems that are happening. And those symptoms could be very physical. So we could be talking about sleep disturbances, headaches, aches and pains, things of that nature. So when we observe these signs, we want to be asking what symptoms. When we notice things, we want to speak up. We want to ask somebody how they're doing. And it's really important that we create a non-judgmental space, a space where somebody is able to express themselves, free of criticism, advice, that they're really able to sort of hear that message that what they're experiencing right now is a really, really normal human reaction to an adverse situation. We're going to want to provide, reassurance, and appropriate information. So that help is available. And also, it might be practical information too. That things that while they're feeling this way right now, things like alcohol, isolation, not taking care of ourselves, these can really kind of aggravate those types of mental health symptoms. And hopefully, when we have kind of created that space for somebody where they feel safe, just being listened to, or meeting them where they are, so matching their tone, matching the way that they're talking about these things. That when we start to talk about, maybe resources or suggestions that we might have, once we've given them that respect, I really do feel, in my experience, that type of advice or support, we're going to have, much more success there. So we're getting towards the end here. Our group question number 3: people do amazing things for each other every day. And I think if we're paying attention, just out our window, at work, in the news, on social media, the internet, we're seeing all sorts of really incredible things. So what is a memorable act of kindness that we have recently received, given, or observed?
So again, just go ahead and answer your responses to those to question number 3 in the questions box. We'll give people about 30-45 seconds to enter in their responses, and then we'll ask the moderators to present a synopsis of some of the responses.
That's great. One thing I was going to share that I've just sort of noticed on my block, the block that we live on, there's a lot of young kids, and this must be birthday month or something. Because I didn't know what was happening at first, and then I was able to kind of put it together. We've seen a number of sort of impromptu birthday celebrations, from the sidewalk, from the street, where the families and the kids, from the neighborhood have been maintaining their social distance, but sort of gathering around the house of, a kid in their neighborhood who's having a birthday, just to let them feel that birthday magic, that birthday party, a little bit. And I've seen it happen, I think, 2 or 3 times, and every time, it's such a beautiful thing to observe.
Patrick, we got some great responses. We got several people who mentioned a drive-by parade for birthdays.
Yeah,
that's a great idea.
For sure.
Lots of fun. A lot of random acts of kindness for cheering for nurses and other healthcare professionals. People volunteering to make masks, volunteering to take people to shopping if they feel anxious by going by themselves. Just smiling, just walking by, making sure that social distancing is there, but making sure to say hello to everyone as you are able to go on those very important walks.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, there is so much out there that we can look and really be heartened by, and even in our own neighborhoods. Yeah, birthdays, I think, is a popular one. So our next slide here, I think this was from Edmonton. I believe it's Edmonton. We still had snow there, I guess, at that point. But this was sort of one of these birthday celebrations for a young kid. I think it was actually a pair of brothers. I don't know if they had the same birthday or not. I think they were 4 and 7, and there's people that were able to get these inflatable dinosaur costumes to sort of show up and do something really special in front of the house to make sure that day was important. And recognize when they weren't able to have friends over and do cake and presents, with their classmates. So we're getting towards the end, and where I want to kind of end on is talking a bit about mindfulness. And I like to think of mindfulness as really non-judgmental listening for ourselves. It's something when we can kind of create that safe, non-judgmental, accepting us where we are ourselves. Is something we can do. So the definition here is a mental state achieved by focusing one's awareness on the present moment, while calmly acknowledging and non-judgmentally accepting one's feelings, thoughts, and bodily sensations. And there are so many ways that we can slow things down and simplify creating that safe, kind of calm, soothing space for ourselves that we all need. I think we really all need a moment of that during the day. I was kind of interested in talking about CBT strategy. I think we're running a little short on time to maybe get into that, but some of the resources that we're going to be talking about are going to employ that. Really what CBT is kind of the idea that sometimes we are our own worst enemies. Sometimes our behaviors and our thoughts, are making us feel worse. We might be mistaking our emotions or our thoughts as being facts, and what they kind of really do, sometimes can reinforce a negative perception that we have of ourselves, or a negative perception of the world around us, or maybe reinforce a negative behavior that is, really making us feel worse. So it's about identifying when that is happening, and experimenting with new ways of thinking and sort of reacting to the situation. That might make us feel better, or at least offer us a different perspective to sort of understand that, while our thoughts can be really heavy and our emotions can be, really overwhelming, it doesn't necessarily mean, that they are facts about ourselves or the world around us. And it's a really, really popular strategy. It's a popular self-help strategy, and often, when we're talking to counselors or therapists, it's a place that they often begin. So mindfulness activities, kind of once again, when we talk about self-care, there's so many ways to access that. Walking, meditating, stretching, breathing, exercise as well. What we're really trying to do is, use our senses. What we're hearing, smelling, seeing, or breathing, using our body. When life sort of feels overwhelming, when we don't feel that we have the ability to sort of sort out all of life's problems, when our mind is racing, this isn't maybe necessarily the time to sort of, answer all of those big questions that we have. Mindfulness encourages us to bring things, down a level, to bring things to kind of to what we can control in that moment. We can control our breath. We can control our feet. We can control maybe what we're noticing, that we're hearing, or what it is that we're seeing. And by exercising that type of control, what we're really doing is kind of giving ourselves the elasticity that in the future, when we face adverse situations, not necessarily to ignore them, but to maybe meet them with a little bit more, confidence, because we know that, that these thoughts and these negative feelings, that they are things that, can be observed, and while they may feel really, really real in that moment, that they are going to pass. And there's a tremendous amount of mindfulness, resources that are on the internet, all over the place that you can look at. So here are a few mental health resources we're going to mention. Ability CBT, which is one that the government of Manitoba, is promoting, and what it is sort of a series of activities to help you develop better coping skills, but you also get to work, I think it's for 12 weeks, with a professional therapist as well that will check in with you over the phone, through email, through text. Wellness Together Canada is kind of similar, in that way, a lot of self-help tools, but also immediate crisis support, from trained professionals. And I can't overemphasize that enough. If we are feeling, we're concerned, for our own safety, or the safety of somebody else, as a result of, mental, maybe a mental health difficulty, thoughts of suicide, excessive drinking, substance use. That's not really what this workshop is geared towards, but it is just really important that people reach out, at the very least, to 911 or a crisis phone line, that we get help right away if we're ever kind of worried for somebody's safety. There's a lot of different apps out there to explore. Because we don't have a lot of time, I'm just going to mention one that I learned about the other day that's really interesting. It's called 7 Cups. And what it is that you can engage in therapy, kind of help with a counselor if you'd like to. But where it's kind of biggest is volunteers that have been trained to kind of just to talk and text with anybody who might be going through something that needs to talk to somebody, talk to a stranger, talk to somebody that's supportive. It's a really wonderful, interesting way to kind of connect people that just sort of need some human contact. Maybe just kind of talk to somebody about what their situation is. And it's also anybody that's interested maybe in providing help to somebody out there. Maybe this is something that's going to help us kind of feel better, have some more control. Over the world, over these circumstances, maybe a way that we want to kind of do our part. You can complete a course with 7 Cups to be somebody to somebody else. So I think that's a really cool idea. The last slide I wanted to hit here are dogs are winning, and I think we recognize that with some of the comments. My dog, Lily, certainly is winning right now. She is going for more walks and getting more pets than she's ever going to get. in her life. And what's going good for dogs? Well, they're getting that exercise, they're getting lots of sleep, they're getting their own oxytocin, looking faces, and probably giving us some oxytocin that way too. And and they're getting treats. They're making things special for us, and we make things special for them. So I think sometimes kind of looking to our four-legged friends and what's going right for them in this pandemic might give us some clues of ways that we can help ourselves and help each other. So I'd like to thank everybody for being here this evening. It's really a great opportunity. I had a lot of fun doing it. First ever online workshop. It was pretty cool. And I think we have time maybe for